Hello, everyone. Today I'm queued up with Papasmithy, LCK caster turned 100 Thieves general manager, the man, the myth, the legend himself. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Happy to be here, Dash. It's been a while since we've chatted, since World Final a couple of months ago.
That.
So happy to be here, but in a slightly different chair than I'm used to.
And exactly that. And in the biggest of news for the off season, that became your last Worlds, at least as of now, as a caster. And you've transitioned into this management role over at 100 Thieves, specifically the general management role. We'll get into what that means, what you're doing over there at that org, but I kind of want to backpedal a little bit and figure out how we even got to that point. You were known as the LCK guy. I mean, it was Monty Doa originally, and then they departed with you coming in, and you've been the person to go to when it came to LCK expertise and knowledge. What was that like? What did that mean for you to make the decision to let that go, to give that up to pursue something else?
I've always been someone who really tried to focus on kind of career goals, life goals, medium-term, long-term goals. I think a lot of people in our profession are always thinking about where something's leading. And ever since I started at the LCK 4.5 years ago, I was made aware by Christopher or Monty that, his tenure with the LCK wasn't going to be infinite. And they saw me as someone who would follow in his footsteps. So I was groomed in a way to kind of take on that responsibility, and then whacked in the face with it, in 2017 when that happened.
Yep.
And it wasn't a mantle that I took lightly. I understood that there was going to be an uphill battle to replace kind of what was an irreverent duo for so long, a super popular duo. And that was something that I felt like I rose to, and that I was happy to receive all the kind of feedback that people were still really enjoying the product after such visible faces left. And so there was those very obvious medium-term goals of making sure the fans liked the new product, getting to work Riot events, because that was something that was also a couple of years into my career, rising to work a World Final like we did for the first time in 2017 in the Bird's Nest, right?
Yeah.
For the World Finals there, the Samsung 3-0. And for that point, rolling through starting a casting career to getting actually employed as a full-time caster, to being the face of a broadcast, to being on the analyst desk for a World Final, the year later casting a World Final, like that was a very obvious kind of hype train or very obvious pipeline that I followed. It's just that after that was over, the question of what came next arose, because I never liked to rest on my laurels. I always liked to find a new project to work on. And so this last year, it was a lot of streaming and doing kind of other content pieces where possible, coordinating with the Riot Korea side to get some features greenlit and things like that. And that was kind of growing out in a different but related direction. But then there was still this voice in the back of my head kind of whispering, like, is this enough? And are there other directions within the realm of esports that I would like to explore?
So it was following the 2018 season in Worlds. That was kind of the first time the questions of what comes after casting for me really started to jump into your mind.
Yeah, that's I would say that's a pretty fair assessment. I had the Origin offer I've talked about before to be a head coach, so above a drafting coach, but not quite a GM. And that felt like a possibility. And I debated, am I moving to Copenhagen, working with a good friend in Deficio and starting something up there? And there were days when I was doing it. There were days where I wasn't doing it. And at the end of the day, it felt like it was a position that was almost what I wanted, but there was that worry that I would be kind of superfluous. Like I wasn't the general manager. I wasn't the drafting coach. And I was afraid of being kind of a figurehead that was a nice to have, but didn't really have all those deliverables, all those very clear things I needed to do. Meanwhile, in the LCK, I was still relied upon to lead a team and to start initiatives. The Riot Korea broadcast was just starting up, so they needed a familiar face to transition through.
Right.
And so I just said, okay, this is almost there, but it doesn't feel like the time. And so when the 100 Thieves offer came up, towards the end of 2019, that's why I kind of revisited where I was, where I wanted to go, and ultimately made the decision to leave the LCK.
I think that's interesting in a sense that you pointed out some of your duties and responsibilities at the LCK. I should note for people at home that it's different than say being here in North
Sure.
America or
Yeah.
in EU, that a lot more of those administrative, maybe managerial responsibilities did fall on you, whereas there's somebody there to kind of handle that above me here in North America. But to some degree, you were having to operate on a business front, a little bit more on that professional business front, and maybe equipping yourself with some skills that would then translate into a managerial role here with 100 Thieves.
Definitely the autonomy is different just because we were always freelance and because the English broadcast was always a splinter of the kind of Korean production that originally, as everybody knows, was OGN and Spo TV and vendors were handling. So it wasn't, Riot Korea had this vision and followed it through and then assigned it to vendors. It was done by the vendors, and then eventually Riot Korea took on the reins in 2019. So there was a lot for them to answer questions. Like the most funny example here is that the MVP system was something that OGN just kind of inherited from previous broadcasts, whacked onto the broadcast in 2012, before even the LCS got going. And so the MVP system was there.
Right.
And then Riot takes it on. There's no rule book that talks about the MVP. It just was there because OGN did it 7 years earlier. And do we just do it the same? Do we change it? So because they inherited the reins, and then they inherited the English splinter broadcast, which had already grown, 7 years in to be a kind of special thing with lots of irreverent StarCraft talk and going off topic and all the feedback points that I'm sure you see LCS casters get. Be more like them. It's like, no, we just kind of did a thing. And
I've just always been jealous of the outfits. I just want suits like that.
Oh, the rainbow suits. I never got to wear the rainbow suits.
I was going to say, okay, you didn't get to wear the rainbow ones. Is there a specific suit that jumps out in your mind from your LCK days where you're like, that one was either just like so ostentatious or even abominable? Like,
it's funny because people would always assume we dressed ourselves, like, why are you always wearing the same clothes? But it was very much, uniform, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'd roll in first day and you'd be like, oh, I'm wearing a loud pink jumper, and that's gonna be the whole. That's gonna be the whole season.
That's it.
That's it. And it's something that you definitely go into because you understand how the fans are going to perceive it. And you're like, oh, they're really going to like this because I'm just going to look really silly.
Yeah.
And you just roll with it. And you're like, yep, this is what I wear now. You puff it out. You have a good time.
In a weird way, like, I'm going to call it costuming yourself in that way. Like, it gives you permission to be more ridiculous in other regards, right? Because you've already kind of crossed that threshold of what would be shame, right? Like, it's not an outfit I would have chosen for myself, so maybe I feel a little embarrassed wearing it. But
meanwhile,
because I'm wearing it on air,
you've been so colorful over the years. I'm thinking of what, purple mohawks.
I've had the purple mohawk.
That was all you, right?
That was all me. That was me desperately. I don't know what kind of a phase in my life that
grabbing
was.
at something.
Yeah, I don't know. I came in and I went to Kim and I was like, Kim, I've always wanted to do something crazy with my hair. Can I do it? And she's like, I'll work with you to find a time to do it. All Stars is obviously it. I chose purple of all colors,
hey,
and it was like it's one of my favorite colors, but it went more of like a fuchsia purple than like a deep purple. That was an interesting time in my life, but yes, I've been right there with you with some of the audacity when it comes to clothing. But in speaking about this transition, I want to jump back to the point you made around having the Origin head coaching offer, but understanding or at least arriving at the conclusion that was not necessarily the position you wanted. And so I'll ask you this: when those questions started jumping into your brain back in 2018 of like, hey, what's next? What's after casting? Was GM something that came to you easily in identifying like that is the type of role that I want, the type of authority or responsibility that I want to have in an org?
I think the short answer is yes, but the long answer is that even the GM term is kind of whacked onto 10 people, one in each org, and the responsibilities are very different. So I kind of had an idea of the things I wanted to do, the responsibilities, the oversight I wanted, the amount of influence I wanted to be able to exert. And I don't think every GM is built equally, and I don't think every org needs that level of GM. So for example, for myself, I was very much if it says League of Legends, like merchandising, branding, roster selection, staff, etc., I want to at least be consulted on it, and if possible, have final kind of decision on this.
Okay.
Rather than just, I want to look nice in front of the camera and do a bit of content and smile. Papasmithy's there, kind of figurehead role.
Yeah.
And I made that kind of very clear early on in the piece. And I said, look, if that's not what 100 Thieves is looking for, I understand and I respect that, and there might be a better candidate. But if I'm going to leave being entrenched in a profession I really enjoy. I loved casting. I loved casting the LCK. It was my first dream of my esports career to even work at OGN to do League of Legends, let alone grow to the extent and be able to be involved in the Riot broadcast over time. So it was very much, I know there's a perfect role out there for me, and I'll wait for it. I'm happy to take my time, because another year casting LCK is in no way like a poison chalice or anything like that. It's absolutely something that I would have embraced.
I think it's important, right, to take that moment to acknowledge kind of the incredible position you found yourself in, to have an amazing job, to be incredible at the work that you did in it, to be very much the foremost expert on the LCK and the go-to color caster in that regard, and to have that still available to you while searching for this other thing. Just before we get into the actual 100 Thieves aspect of this all, the other thing I wanted to talk about with you is this idea of legacy casters, or how the turnover of casters in professional League of Legends has kind of shown itself over the last 10 years. We've had everything from the Joe and D-Man departures to the Monty and Doa departures. And then, fast forward to today, where you've got people like Shocks moving to freelancer. Kobe did that earlier this year. That whole process. And just kind of, the question to you is there a reason why you think things are trending that way, and that there has been this kind of turnover, maybe as compared to traditional sports where you see people in an analyst or a hosting or a casting role for 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years?
I think there's a lot of answers, and I know a lot of those cases you spoke about, there were individual circumstances, even back to Joe and D-Man, that was the studio moving in Germany.
Right, part of that was just geography.
There's lots of different reasons for it to happen. I think one of the things you have to remember is that because we're such a new sport, because we're now 10 years into what the League of Legends esports scene is, there are opportunities that pop up that in a traditional world, or even in traditional sports, because it's a much older sport, those transitions aren't as easily made. Like caster to GM is a very big move, and it's the sort of thing that there was lots of meetings, there was lots of work that went into kind of proving that I was the right candidate for it. But it's not like you wouldn't see that too commonly in kind of traditional sports, and partly because we're very much in an ecosystem that's growing. Positions like GM are morphing from one thing to another, and thus potentially a different class or style of person is being kind of headhunted for different styles of role. I'm interested to see if in a year's time there's going to be turnover in the GM role towards a different style, or whether things will stay the same. It's so hard to say.
Yeah.
But specifically, I guess the color casters have been largely the ones that have been cycling. It's that we live our lives on the internet compared to, say, traditional sports where you play a traditional sport and then you might interact with your fans online, you might not. We play the game online. People have their Discord channels online, Twitter, and it's all so entrenched.
We're plugged in constantly.
So it's very easy to slide in there and offer someone something, or because everything coexists in the same platform, see an opportunity, even just as an organization, and say, wait, I'd love to have that guy over here. And thus you get a lot of cold offers. I think everyone does. And you just have to assess what direction you want to move into. And I don't think there's any correct answer. Like I think I definitely always saw casting as a more short-term part of my career rather than the 30-year part of my career. But that's only because I had a professional job before where I kind of set goals and was very bullish about it.
Right.
And I wanted to see if I could parlay casting into something in the future. I just never knew what timeline we were talking about. And as League of Legends kept growing, that timeline didn't become a necessary one, because some esports, run for a couple of years and are done, right? And if you don't choose the right time to transition, you don't have a job. But League of Legends is here to stay, and that gave me the luxury to wait around, to really savor what I was doing, but also just make sure there wasn't another opportunity out there that, at least in the short term, seemed like a good move.
So in a lot of ways, this was an intended path. Not necessarily GM at 100 Thieves was always my goal, but that going through, through casting and then on to more was always something that was on your mind.
Yeah, I'm someone who thinks about my skill set, and while the broadcast side is something I've worked at for many, many years, I originally trained as a psychologist. I worked as a school counselor. There were moments participating in that job where you're working with young people, mentoring, mediating conflicts and stuff. And a lot of those apply to being a GM or working on the team side that I wanted to return to. There was definitely parts of that life that I left behind as the esports journey started that I wanted to see, wait, there must be some way that, esports and my talent set, both broadcast wise and previously, could come together. And that's kind of what I imagined the general manager position could grow to be.
Do you think that esports casters have a different lifespan than traditional sportscasters by virtue of the space? Can I still be the LCS host at age 40? Could Kobe still be an analyst at 40, 45, 50 for League and or another game? Is there something inherently different about esports that demands a shorter lifespan of the casters?
I think coming again to my point about a lot of esports not being 10, 20-year products, if it's a short turnaround thing, then I think definitely the lifetime was short. But I think now that League of Legends has grown out, puffed out its chest, it's 10 years in, it's, only growing. In this particular case, I think we do have the luxury of potentially becoming 10, 20-year broadcasts. I actually do think that, you've grown with the audience. The audience has gotten older in terms of the people that are there from the start, but young new people are coming in. And obviously you guys have leveled up to the point where, you guys have a skill set and an association with a massive growing audience that is only ever strengthening, I think, rather than any issues coming there. So I think for League of Legends, the answer is that you're here to stay as long as you want to, assuming you keep up the great work that you do. I think for other games, and I think just as a general rule, I think you always kind of have to test the waters and definitely keep yourself vigilant, because not everyone is built equally on that particular side.
I like that. I think I'll stick around for a little while if they'll have me. All right, moving on to 100 Thieves.
Sure.
First, what are your honest thoughts on 100 Thieves before you arrived? So and maybe let's isolate specifically to 2019. I mean, because we could look all the way back to 2018, their inception, phenomenal spring split, finishing second to TL, and then having a bit of a come down in summer. But more I want to identify, since you came in following the 2019 season, kind of what your opinion, an honest opinion of the roster, the team's successes or failures throughout the 2019 season, from that perspective. And then we'll talk about, once you became GM, having the benefit of looking from the inside, what you thought.
Well, I think you're kind of pigeonholing me, because
I am a little
2019 only and successes, which unfortunately there were very
weren't
few.
Many.
And that was obviously a pain point for the organization, because they looked at 2018, second in circuit points, made a final, weren't able to beat Team Liquid. And they said, okay, let's bring in Bang. Let's look for upgrades. We're close.
Right.
And they weren't, is the reality there. Is they thought they were close. They made the changes they thought that would become a championship roster, and it wasn't.
But did you have an opinion from the outside as to why that is? Because, again, I think a lot of us,
course,
we watch Bang get added to that roster, and a lot of us are like, boom, straight upgrade, right? Then this team should be better, and it didn't work. And so did you have an outward opinion on, like, I think I can already identify what's not working here? I
think definitely, if you look at the style they proved to play, this kind of slow scaling style in a faster paced meta. The moment that, turret plates are involved, where basically pre-14 minutes there's gold, you have to be aggressive, take it. The roster just didn't fit that configuration. Okay. So it's this interesting balance where, when you speak about the decisions made in 2019, the one thing I credit 100 Thieves for doing is saying, all right, we're close, let's upgrade to try to get better. Because not every team does that, right? Some teams stay together, power of friendship, and then go too long, and then they should have looked for the upgrade earlier. Right. I respect the fact that they looked for it. Obviously, the results bore out that it didn't work. Okay. And it's even coming in late, and you never want to just be like, what were you guys doing here? Yeah. But I very much came in, and I was like, hey, I actually really respect the decision you made there. The fact that it didn't work isn't actually the part you should focus on. Like, it was correct to try to look for an upgrade. Right. Now we've got the learnings there, and let's try and go in a different direction. So obviously, 2019 successes were very few and far between. It was nice to see the renaissance towards the end of summer, where they were able to put together a game plan that was getting them wins, and they were in the calculation for playoffs pretty late. This offer came in basically after the season had concluded for them, or around there. So obviously, I was tangentially aware of what's happening in North America. You'll know this, time zones, North America and Korea are not the best. Yeah. So obviously following their.
I'm always watching the LCK at 2
Yeah.
in the morning when I should be going to sleep
VODs, right?
for a show the next day.
So at the end of the day, my kind of takeaways of 100 Thieves were largely around what they had been so successful about, and to zoom all the way back kind of to 2017 when Nate Shot's releasing his announcement that they've been accepted into franchising and stuff. The thing that really attracted me about 100 Thieves is what they're really good at, because 100 Thieves having a emotional core.
What would you identify as what 100 Thieves is very good at?
So I think the burst of fandom, obviously Nate Shot as a brand is a phenom. I'm not from the Call of Duty or FPS world, so I only ever really knew of Nate Shot from his League of Legends persona, right? Or from his persona on the heist, or when it came to being accepted. And already you could see this warm, relatable person who's genuinely excited, who's coming into League of Legends with esports eyes, but new to the League of Legends scene, and being this like emotional center of a piece. And that drew in a lot of fandom, right?
His personality, his energy are just so infectious.
And that was something that, regardless of their results, because he was there to center it, you wanted to see them succeed. You had a core to a concept. Obviously, branding wise,
they knocked it out of the park there.
We've done it's an adjustment, as you can see. Adjust between time periods and I and we, but it's a we now, right?
Yeah.
So we obviously hit it out of the park when it came to the branding and things like that. And the big attraction of coming in was I was coming into an org that wants to win.
Yep.
That now understands that just adding in superstars might not be the way. They've tried that. It didn't work. It could have been particulars. It could have been the concept. We don't know. Obviously, we're testing along the way.
Right.
But they understand that there are many different pathways to success, and I'm trying to put us down one. But around that, the really attractive thing personally is that we still have a fantastic leadership team. We have Nate Shot. We have excellent branding. They knocked a lot of kind of the content side out of the park this year. So there's a lot for me to learn as I'm growing my breadth of capabilities outside of just analyzing League of Legends. So surrounding myself with top people in their areas is a learning experience for me. And I'm just trying to kind of provide that League of Legends direction to try to make sure that our on the Rift results can mirror all the great stuff happening out back.
All right, that's a little bit from your side. Now, when these conversations were taking place, what did 100 Thieves come to you looking for? Like on when that, what did they say? Papasmithy, this is what we need in a GM. This is what we would need you to come in and do. Did they have specific asks? Was there a game plan on their side that you specifically aligned with and could fulfill ultimately?
I think it was a little bit. It was definitely a scaled down version of what it turned into.
Okay.
Very much general manager term, and obviously we're kind of mutually understanding what the responsibilities are. Obviously, I had kind of a list of directives, which are very much around hiring staff, hiring a team, signing things up, coordinating on kind of the heist and other content that we're making around League of Legends, all those sorts of things. But I kind of wanted to fill in the blanks with this idea of also being involved in things like marketing and getting to understand things around that, and branding and content, and trying to push the envelope, because to me, the GM is very much surrounding yourself, hiring obviously the staff and players that you think can take on the League of Legends side. And look, I come into scrims, I watch games, I hold my opinion to afterwards and then ask people questions. I'm not coming in there to do anyone else's job. But the goal for me is not to kind of coach them to win League of Legends. That's Six's job, right?
Right.
So at the end of the day. So it's understanding all the different areas that League of Legends organization can take on, also working with Academy and kind of the future of the League of Legends program there. So it's understanding that we have a lot of amazing resources at 100 Thieves, and trying to, from my perspective, think about where they are now, where they can go, and what I can do to just shine up what is a really top ship that we have, 100 Thieves.
What would you say on the outset of this position has been maybe your biggest obstacle or, to overcome? What's been the toughest thing to tackle so far in your new position?
I think roster building for 2020 was really difficult.
Any particular reason it was difficult, or just in general, it's a difficult thing to do?
At the end of the day, like you set your goals, right?
Yeah.
And I imagine that every team sets the goal of being able to win worlds. Now, for a North American LCS team, given that's something that hasn't happened before, maybe it errs more towards the fanciful side as, say, for example, a G2 who was so close, right?
It's a bit pie in the sky, but it's still
it's
a goal that everyone should have in mind.
And you look down at the teams that have done that. Team Liquid, obviously, 4 back-to-back, and you look down and you say, okay, this team pretty much has top 3 in every role. And, they've been able to be coached smartly and they've kept their egos in checks and they've continued to grow and roll with the times.
Yep.
They're doing a lot right there. And then you come into a team and we had a lot of contracts expiring. We had 2 Korean imports who were kind of the bedrock of the team and then potential for a lot of change there. And then it's kind of like, okay, now you need top 3 in every role if you're going to compete.
Right.
And so you have to start thinking, can I do that now? Do I have to start thinking about a longer term approach? Where am I hedging my bets? Where am I taking my risks? And where are you getting there? Because you can't get the fantasy lineup, right? Like if everyone's asleep at the fantasy draft and you end up with Licorice, all the superstars all the way through,
right,
then you're going to win the league, right? That's just the reality there. But it turns out when you're like, could I please have your best player? People are not that interested.
They say no. Yeah, more often than not. That's amazing. Yes, if everyone could throw $50 million at the problem, then everyone would be the best team in the league, right? And that's just simply not the case. So then what exactly is your philosophy around building a team? Do you think that people look too short-term currently in League of Legends? This idea, you sort of prefaced it, this idea that, like, can I achieve top 3 in every role this split? Probably not, right? Do you think too many teams that are looking at the problem that way and try to make the best team for this split as opposed to saying, what's my 2-year plan to be the best team in the LCS?
See, I don't want to come in and ascribe
what other
teams are doing.
Fair enough.
I'm not in those meetings. I just went through my first round of what an off season looks like, and there are some days where, oh boy, are you growing gray hair? Like I already had the gray coming.
Well, dude, we get a before and after 1-year GM
so much hair
photo
before,
for Papasmithy. Okay, well then let me just ask it from your perspective. Do you want? I mean, what was your approach then? You identified, hey, I don't think I can get necessarily. I can buy top 3.
There were a lot of. There's variables, right? Like on the one hand, you look at what you have, where we had some great players, specifically import players, and try to understand what roster around them can work. You look at the landscape of the market, and we kind of had this. Very early, you look at the contract database, who's expiring, and you're like, okay. A lot of junglers look like they're going to be available this offseason. So North American jungler seemed like something that a lot of teams are on the market for. We saw a lot of movement in terms of the junglers. In fact, I think basically
almost every single jungler moved.
Yeah.
Did any jungler not stay?
I mean, Blabber, I guess, was the
right. Okay, yeah, he was already on C9, but now into the official starter position here. But yeah, in a weird way. So you start
penciling, okay, maybe North American jungler, not sure who, waiting for obviously the windows to be able to go there.
Yeah.
And then it's, what roster can I put together that I feel like can compete, and how aggressive a timeline can I put on that and give myself options? And that was kind of the philosophy I went through.
Right.
Because the unique thing about this offseason that I learned, and it's not something that's been talked about publicly, but this was not an offseason where people heard obviously all the rumors around big transfer fee for Vulcan and Vulcan's moving.
Yeah, that he
to
was
Cloud9.
He was big.
But that was actually there were not a lot of players that were just, here's the number, and now you have him. Almost all players were, what's the trade going to be? Or what do you have to offer here? And it's nice that you've got money, but you actually can't buy a player to replace
that I'm
this
joining?
player.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of different variables going on there. And when we didn't have a lot of capital, because most of our contracts were expiring, it was a lot of, okay, how are we going to be able to actually find a first piece to build on and from there? And who will that first piece be? So there was definitely a lot of philosophical directions a roster can go into. And it was a challenge. Don't get me wrong. It was a challenge, but I'm super happy with what I ended up with. But man, there were some days at the start there where I was like, where are we going?
Yeah.
Where are we going today?
Well, so talk to, what was the base? I mean, I imagine it's the guys who stayed on the roster, right? But was the concept, hey, someday that's someone we want to work back into the starting LCS lineup and build a team around him specifically? What was your attack plan? Was it a play style, and I want to find 5 players that fit a specific way of playing the game? Was it, I'm just going to look at individual skill and trust that we can coach them into a team? Kind of what was the attack plan in the offseason for identifying the players that you'd want to ultimately court?
So the 2 earliest things I focused on was, let's find a head coach. It became clear that there was needing to be a change at 100 Thieves. We're going to move away from Prolly, and it was, who's out there? What's possible? What am I looking for in a head coach?
Yeah.
I played around with the idea of a Korean head coach and kind of bringing in a different perspective there. But ultimately, I decided, no, I need someone who knows the North American ecosystem from behind the scenes rather than I watched a lot of LCS and kind of lived through a lot of the competitive scene. I needed
Right.
someone who had those eyes, right? The experienced eyes while I grow those. Like maybe the next coach, who's to say if Tony is going to be our coach for 5 years
Right.
or not. But in the future, when I've grown a competency of knowing North American system from actually being in it, then maybe there's flexibility.
You could afford to look somewhere else.
Exactly. But being able to come in and pick up Zix early in
That's
the
a huge
offseason,
pickup too.
it was a really big pickup for me because it's someone who I've known even tangentially from when Monty worked with him
Right.
5-6 years ago, when he
Yeah.
was an assistant
Back when
coach.
they had the wheel of how to win.
I was doing the sums, and I think I worked out that he might be the longest standing English coach of all time.
He very well might be. Yeah.
It's
because
2014 to now,
Right.
constantly employed.
Otherwise, you would look at, the other names that jump to my brain are people like Loco, but he's had stints not as head coach. And then Parth, similar thing. He's both been a coach, but also, he's kind of wavered in his title. So yeah, Zix probably is.
And he's someone who I have a lot of respect for, who knows the scene, who you throw a name, he knows about them, whether it's a solo queue star or, an experienced player. And that's something that was really important for me because I can't be the expert on North America because I decided I wanted to be. I have to actually learn that. It's a competency to grow that I will grow over the course of this year. So having that was super helpful to have that really experienced perspective. And in joining with that, casting a world final where we had superstar mid lane matchup, right?
Oh, so
Caps
good.
in the mid lane, Doinby in the mid lane, and they're playing Nautilus versus Pyke in game number 1. So they're not looking for who's getting their lost chapter back timing, who's like eking out solo kills. No, like it's very much this game's about movement. I think the game has tended more and more away from individual lane advantages to whatever advantage you can get, how can you spread it? How can you take over the map? The moment that your mid lane is going towards the top side, the enemy top laner can't push up because he doesn't know if the enemy mid lane is going to collapse or not.
Right.
They have to pull back. So it became such a team-focused game that I had this thought of it needs to be, an English first language squad. It needs to be people who are very experienced in speaking in English. So that obviously put the roster in a certain direction there. But so I was thinking, okay, I want my players who are communicators, who can move, who speak English. Like those were kind of the very basic things. And I've got my head coach, but still there was a lot of work to be done.
Right, yeah. So Zix is a huge first pickup. Now let's work through some of the other roster moves. I think the one that jumped out to me straight away was the fact that Meteos is returning to 100 Thieves. And I think it's a question that has to be asked. This is a guy who was kicked from this org. Now, understanding that a lot of the pieces have changed, and so the environment is by virtue of that different. Talk to me about the process of getting Meteos in general, but also having a conversation with the player around like the culture here is different than when you were here, and bringing somebody like him and then Cody Sun as well, back into the team.
It was an interesting experience because he's someone that I've known, from his kind of stints on the broadcast team from time to time doing analyst desk and things like that. Over the years, I did some work before kind of worlds and big tournaments going around the Cloud9 house when they were visiting Korea. And getting to watch scrims and talk to them about the game. Like he's a name, he's a very opinionated guy, as you know. You've sat next to him many times, talked to him off air. So he's someone who's game knowledge.
He's probably one of the pro players I'm most well acquainted with.
Which makes it super social guy.
Yeah.
Whenever there's a content request from Riot, I'm like, is this Meteos? It's always
He's gung-ho.
Meteos.
I was literally, we were talking about this. I was filming with him on Sunday, a piece that somewhere else yesterday. That will come out in the future, right? So a little bit
Timelines
of timeline messing with you right there. But yeah, he's always a joy to work with.
And it's very, you reach out to a player like that, and if he just said, no, like this org did me wrong, I'm not interested, like you couldn't really blame him for that, right? Like he gets to have his say on it.
Right.
But the first thing he said was, when I heard the news that you were becoming part of 100 Thieves, all I could think about was that I wish you were there, back when I was on the team. So that obviously means a lot, the personal connection there. And he was actually our first player signed. So he was the first player to commit. And he committed with roster ideas. But as you can imagine, a lot of top players, top 3 players in their role, they want to know who everyone else is before they give you the green light, right? There's a lot of agency there. And so for him to commit early allowed us to start locking in other names.
Yeah.
And then
that speaks volumes to. I mean, I'm just going to compliment you here straight up. It speaks volumes to what you mean, obviously, as an addition to the org. Because I will also say that on Sunday I asked a similar question to Meteos, and he echoed exactly what you just said. That he was like, "Well, it was when I heard that Papasmithy was joining as GM that I got excited about returning to that team because I think he's got an incredible mind, analytical mind around League of Legends, and really pushes to understand the game and the way it changes. And so that just brings up another quick question. It's a little slight deviation, but quick question, which is that, do you feel like there's an undue pressure on you because of your status as a caster to be successful as a GM? You just are a bigger public face than most GMs are in the LCS. And with your wide knowledge of the game itself, do you feel some kind of added pressure from the public that like you got to make it happen in this first split or first year?
I think there's always two sides to the same idea. Where you're talking about the added pressure, but I also read so many comments where like, he's already the best GM. Like, I loved him as a caster, and like, he's #1.
Okay.
Can people be as good as him? And it's like, and I'm looking at those being like, I
haven't done anything.
I haven't done anything yet, you know? And that's because you're in the public eye, you're always going to get both, right?
Okay.
And because my reputation as a caster was really positive,
right?
It's mostly the side I'm talking about, where it's a lot of people giving me undue praise. And obviously you lose 4 stage games in a row, and then suddenly the other side comes out, right?
Right.
So at the end of the day, I'm aware that I'm a very public GM, and that's not something that can be lost on me. But it's things like a player, you know, just from personal conversations and appreciating my casting, committing to my team is not something I take lightly. Like, that's something that allowed us to kind of put together the roster we did, was someone taking a leap of faith with me. And at the end of the day, 5 LCS players, 5 Academy players, they've all taken a leap of faith that I can make the transition. And I'm taking a leap of faith that I can make this transition. And only hindsight will prove whether that was true. Yeah. I just know that for me, I've always been single-minded about the ascent. If I'm not the best at something, I try to work out why I'm not, and I address that as fast as I can. I always look for the intermediate steps towards growing there. I am never someone that's suffered being fine at something. I always want to get in there and get better. So I've been super upfront with Meteos and with other people who have a lot more experience of what a League of Legends kind of team and org looks like. And I say, look, I'm going to make mistakes in this transition. I can't nail it every time. Coming from the broadcast side, coming from Korea to North America, there's going to be times I make mistakes, but mistakes are a good thing. Mistakes are a thing to be embraced, because only from mistakes can you learn. If you're not making enough mistakes, you're not taking enough risks.
Right.
So I'm going to try stuff, and I'm empowering everyone to be very clear with their feedback. And hopefully...
Have you made any big mistakes yet?
I don't think I've messed anything up in a massive way, but right now, kind of we're just starting to understand what the day-to-day ecosystem looks like, and I've definitely asked a lot of dumb questions. I'm like, what about this?
And
people
like, that's a dumb question. Right?
That's a dumb question. I'm like,
they just tell you straight up, that's a dumb question.
I'm like, what about this? And we tried that on 3 other teams that didn't work. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it seemed cool when I was a caster, but
right. Oh, trust me, we have so many opinions as casters of the way. Yeah, I mean, I know you. I'm just like, it's to the audience.
You learn a lot.
Very aware. I know that we sit there on the analyst desk and we're like, they've got to do something. This would definitely work if they were to employ this. And it's
you just learn.
You just don't understand.
The breadth of what you know about a single team, and obviously a lot of other teams are in mystery, is so different, because the broadcast is always from what is the established, what is the theory of the new. Let's put those together and evaluate whether they should have stuck with established or gone in a new direction.
And you're doing just a whole lot of hypothesizing, right?
Meanwhile,
between those extremes.
When you know it all, you'll have cases where like a champion pick doesn't come in a stage game. People are like, why didn't they just pick Azir here?
Right.
But of course, if you'd been in the trenches, you know that maybe you lost 8 Azir scrims in a row. Maybe this is like the one champion where they lost a stage game on it 2 years earlier, and now it's like
it's the death of them.
It's like they just don't want to play that. And there's a lot more. And you get this from coaches sometimes. You know, I feel like Reaper has said this sometimes, where he's like, no, that the players just didn't want to play that, so I didn't pick it.
Right.
And that's not something you can say as a caster, because then you're if you're like, maybe he just didn't feel it today.
Right. What a lame piece of analysis.
So much, right?
Yeah, maybe they just didn't want to play. Well, no shit.
But then when you're actually there, you're like, oh, actually that is a real thing.
that was
you
the
you learn it. So there's a lot of stuff there where you're like, oh, that's why these things happen.
Wow. Okay. Back onto some of the roster moves. The other massive one that jumped out to me is Ryoma. Am I saying is it Ryoma or Ryoma?
So
I've heard it both ways.
The Prince of Tennis character is Ryoma Echizen, I think.
Right.
I had to learn this. I don't watch anime, but I believe we're going with Ryoma.
Ryoma, okay, because that's what Meteos was saying on Sunday, and I had always heard
we had a
Ryoma
conversation
prior.
Like 3 days earlier, where it was like, what are we going to do?
What are we going to call him? Okay, so Ryoma.
And he liked Ryoma more.
All
also,
right.
we've dropped the 0. It's an O now.
Okay, sweet.
The 0 was very edgy. But
I'm a fan of real letters.
Okay. Quick shot also
as an
made
English
that change.
speaker, as someone who has to read those names
5-6
in a
years
prompter.
ago, 0 was the way. Quick shot had a 0 back in the day.
Did,
Trevor,
you're right.
I'm watching you. I know that.
But that just means you weren't the original, because somebody else got the O. But Ryoma, relatively unknown. I think a lot of people are going to be listening to this going to be like, I've never even heard that name.
Sure.
But the reason why this pickup is so intriguing to me is that it is an OCE pickup. And one of the major differences, or one of the major talking points, rather, in this offseason in particular was the idea of imports, with a couple of factors playing into that conversation. Number one, import rules changed in Academy to only dictate that the top 4 regions are an import, which would allow you to fill up an Academy squad with entirely OCE players or LATAM players if you so desired, and maybe can start to cultivate some more talent in the LCS through the Academy system. By the same token, one of the other conversations was, why are no NA mids finding starting positions outside of Golden Glue on Golden Guardians? And here we have Ryoma coming in as an OCE player, relatively unknown, earning a starting spot. So just walk me through the acquisition of this more unproven player.
So the timeline here actually can kind of be fully put on the table because all the information about LCS 2020 has largely been revealed here. I knew early in the piece this idea of the minor region import slot. So while that was there, my first goal was, coming back to what I was mentioning about, mid laners who can communicate and roam and first language English. That was kind of where we started. Like, let's find a mid laner who speaks English, who theoretically is aggressive and can rotate. And obviously that does, rule out some people. But we're scouring the world here because at this point we had basically committed to the idea of someday coming back to the top, and mid laner, import slot, not import slot. We're looking for the right person, right? So it was all on the table there.
Right.
And so through that, it was a case of narrowing down, all right, let's start reviewing the tape of basically every candidate that makes sense here. We cast a super wide net. So given the parameters, we're talking North America, LCS and Academy, Europe and EU Masters. We're looking to, I grew it to Oceania, but originally you're kind of just thinking, what did every team do before? All right, the best EU mid they could get. Okay. But guess what?
Now it's the best EU jungler you can get. It's just the best EU whatever.
But you understand the attraction there, right?
Yes,
the
absolutely.
English side is so and only more important over time.
Right.
And so you're looking at your candidates there. You're working out who's even willing to talk to you, because it turns out not everyone wants to come to a team that didn't cover themselves in glory in 2019. The brand matters, but then the roster around it matters. Timings matter. There's all sorts of factors there.
Right.
And it was about, where can we find the player that kind of fits what we're looking for in a mid laner? And the Oceanic players, obviously I watch more OPL than the average person just because of my association with it in the past.
Yeah.
And there's players there, but when it's me looking at an OCE player, understanding the fact that this is a region that's never made it to the main stage of Worlds, it's always like, he seems good, but I can't be the final decider then. Obviously I have, a crew. It was an assistant coach, Jungle Juice, Zix, our main coach, Kelsey also pinch hitting there.
Yep.
And we had more people kind of associated with the offseason side. So I'm just giving names. I'm just like, this guy seems pretty good, and I spoke to Spawn, who obviously knows a lot about the players' reputations and has cast Oceania for a long time. And he's like, yeah, he seems good. He's a good kid. So he gave him kind of the personality check on the outside there. So no risk factors there. So it's just a case of, what do you guys think about this guy?
Yeah.
And I had already recommended a few OC players before, and they were like, no.
Right.
And they were kind of at the point where they're like, you need to stop recommending
OCE
players. I get it. You're Australian. Wonderful.
Right. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
You just want to hear that accent from somebody else
And
in,
so
in the
we're
house.
coming in, and this is like on the road. This is at Worlds. Like I'm just having meetings where it's like we're going over 5 candidates in a role, and what does everyone think about them?
Yeah.
And so this is like the, probably the last straw for the Oceanic region, unfortunately, when it comes to being considered on 100 Thieves for 2020. And we get into the meeting, they're like, Chris is actually good. And I was like, okay. All right.
Here, yeah, we're getting somewhere.
So we review him, we look over gameplay, we look over all the intangibles we know, and we're like, this kid seems really good. We don't know what that means. We don't know if that means LCS good. We don't know if that means Academy good. We don't know where it all fits, but it was very much we know enough that he's impressed against candidates, worldwide, right? Like this kid's got something. And so I just made the executive call of let's just fly him over and have play solo queue, like no job offer, no specifics, just hey, we like what you're doing, come and play some games, and then let's kind of have him. He's kind of being slow cooked, and like we'll keep doing what we're doing. We're still running down all our proceeds. We're still talking to all the teams and all our candidates with mid lane and obviously at this point other lanes as well.
Yeah,
and then let's work out later where Ryoma fits.
Cool.
And so that he was very much. We want him somewhere.
Yeah.
And let's work out later what makes the most sense.
Awesome. So then the roster's now been established.
Mm-hmm.
We've landed on our starting 5. What are your aspirations here? I know we talked earlier and we said, well, I hope that every team's aspirations ultimately is to win Worlds. The reality is, in particular for an LCS team, while no LCS team has done it, it might be a little bit less so. And then there's the concept of cooking a team, right? Exactly as we talked about with this player, Ryoma. So what are the aspirations here in 2020?
The aspirations are definitely, winning every game, going to Worlds, winning the World Final. But obviously there's realism behind it, coming back to Ryoma. Like he proved to be someone whose professionalism and his application to the game and his potential upside we thought would be realized.
Yes.
But to finish the point, we were also aware of the likely change, now official change in how the year is running in terms of Spring Split no longer has the circuit points quotient. So it was very much if we think this guy can grow to be top 3, he's kind of got a Spring Split to go out there, fail some games. And if we read it correctly, if we read the room correctly, if we did our sums and we worked out his potential, there's time there to grow to be the player that could be top 3, that could be a great player here. So there's very much this, we're benefited by the fact that no one really knows what to make of our mid laner or our team in general. We're running back some of the players. We've got a lot going on. Our Papasmithy guy, he seems pretty nice. People have got their takes, but no one's pigeonholed us anywhere. And so it's honestly a case of let's establish our baseline, win some games, lose some games. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
And then let's just keep that trajectory up because we now have the luxury of if you peak in, August, July, August, when we're talking about
right at the
around
mid to end of summer split,
then you go to Worlds.
Yeah.
And if we've done our correct prep in terms of where this players can get to and where this process can get to, then that is a lot of time for us to get in there to wear the losses, to own the losses, but also to recognize the positives and improve. So I'm just very much about if every day is trending upwards, wherever we start, by the time we end, obviously everyone else is trending upwards as well, right?
Right.
Everyone's trying to do the same thing, but it's my first off season. I feel like we did our due diligences and made the right decisions based on the information we had. And then it's just a constant evaluation of where it's going, but hopefully straight to Worlds.
So are there, hopefully, I would love to see that. Papasmithy comes in as GM, first year, wins North America, their first world title. What a story that would be. I would be blessed to cover it.
We can just edit in the part where I'm lifting the trophy now.
Right,
Release this
you know what?
November
Let's just announce
2020.
it now, and we'll do the post game here. Are there metrics outside of team placement or finishing place that you can use in League of Legends to evaluate success? And I'll pitch that in comparison to, say, a traditional sport where I can look at basketball and I can say, okay, this is a shooting guard, right? So he's got to be putting up some points. Like he needs to be putting up numbers. I can look at those specific metrics and say, what's his free throw percentage? These are all inherently valuable metrics, you probably don't isolate one and make a decision based off of a single metric, but you can look at all of them and say he's either having a good or a bad season, he's on the decline or the incline, whatever. In League, looking at KDA, looking at those kinds of individual statistics, I find are a lot less useful in evaluating the success of a player, simply because their role game to game can vary wildly. This game, your job is to go down 20 CS and just not die in the top lane because you're in a losing matchup. But next game, you need to stomp him by 20 CS and take the turret. So then you can't look at his CSing statistics and say he either is or isn't a good player. So how do you, outside of saying we finished third this split and that's good, that is an uptick from last split, how do you look at a team or a player and actually evaluate subjectively or objectively whether or not they're improving or, you know, hitting the bar that you need them to hit or you expect them to hit?
That's a tricky question, right? And I think the nuance you speak about is something that's lost on some people, where they just see something like a KDA or a CSD.
Yeah.
Like, that means he's better than the guy with the lower number. And in traditional sports, like you're mentioning, the higher your batting average, the better you are in baseball, right?
Right.
But in League, there is all that couching. And I think some players' careers can kind of be unfairly deflated because their numbers were lower, but the people in that team knew they played a really important role. So I think it's a super nuanced thing, and it's something that I think is very difficult for me to on the spot answer. Honestly, it's surrounding yourself with smart people whose opinions you respect, knowing and establishing the biases you have. So one of the first things I did with my scouting team was, what are your biases? Like, what kind of players do you like, and what kind of players don't you like?
You actually got that out on the table.
I wanted that out on the table because it's important to know that about yourself.
Absolutely.
Everybody likes a certain style of League of Legends, whether that's how they play themselves or this is the beautiful kind. Like, I was a Rocks Tigers guy, not an SKT guy.
Okay.
Right? Back in the day in 2016, and there were different camps for different things. So we got that all out there, and it's embracing your biases. You can't just downplay them. Like, you can't control for these things, especially because the numbers aren't just going to answer everything for you. It's understanding those things, putting out your thoughts, and then coming together as a collective and just weighing things and trying to speak about it. It's a very imprecise science, but that's probably why it's so alluring, is you're looking at it and you're seeing a player playing an OCE and you're seeing certain things and you're like, I want to see him do that in LCS. This could be great. I don't know what he's doing there, but we can fix that, I think. We're smart, right? You know, like, there's all sorts of what ifs there. And so it's very much, I think, putting that all out on the table, making a hypothesis, working towards it, and then if it doesn't work, then working out what the next steps are there.
Because I think, if anything, it's an interesting problem to solve, right? And it's a problem that both we as analysts and a broadcast team need to solve just as much as everyone behind the scenes.
If you guys got the secrets, just slide into my DMs.
We don't, but that's why, and as you know, we don't, right? Because we sit up there and we go, God, I mean, I want to pull stats for this guy, but are they really honest? Maybe
who's
to what
better,
the performance
Faker or
is?
Rookie? It's like,
right. And if you
what
just
time frame,
if you just do a
lane,
stats side by side comparison, you're going to get nothing. You're going to get nothing definitive out of that necessarily. But that's why I wanted to ask the question to you, because I mean, only having, you know, a number of months, you know, under your belt behind the scenes, it will ultimately lend a different perspective. And I guess where I imagine you go, or where you get value, is the conversations with the people you also consider to be experts. There has to be some amount of faith placed in the roster themselves evaluating their teammates, right? The same way I would to you at the end of a broadcast, say, Papasmithy, do you have any feedback? How did you feel about my performance today? Because yours is an opinion, a practiced opinion that I trust. Similarly, I imagine then in the team environment, some of the most valuable information you can get is less the objective information of stats and more the subjective information that you're getting from your coaches, your players, and your analysts about, this is what I saw and this is what I know about the game to be true or untrue. And
I kind of compare it to what's a good cast and what was a bad cast. And it's not often that you nailed everything and predicted everything. It's often the conversation and the things that got you there, like the work that you undertook, and then people can recognize the journey that you went on. And I think the off season was very much a journey for me and everyone involved. Tried to surround myself with smart people, put our biases out there, made our hypotheses, and then we'll learn from that, and it will be something we can return to, because obviously we've made notes and we've gone through it in the future to understand, oh, we really did think too much about this,
Yeah.
things like that. But to me, it was very much what are all these pieces? What do they look like? Would that come together in a way that would work, kind of where the meta is and where it's going and where we hypothesize it's moving towards? And Riot can just, take an axe and change that, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to make your bets. You got to lock it in at some point, right? The first player being signed, the moment that a contract's signed, you're like, okay, I've got a piece now.
Yeah.
I can only have 5 Pokemon. One of them's Meteos. So, and then building around what that means.
Hey, that's a good starter Pokemon.
I feel pretty good about
it. If Meteos was offered to me as one of my starter Pokemon, I think I would probably take it. Yeah.
And it's, people try to understand what it means that we have Meteos, we have Someday, we're running back Cody Sun as well, 3 players from before. And they're like, did you do it because it worked before? And I'm like, I think the thing you learn, like when people ask for the Rocks Tigers to be rejoined in 2020, I'm like, that team wouldn't be good anymore. So much has changed. And that's the thing is, it's a really happy coincidence that it went this way, but it was very much, okay, we're starting around Meteos, smart player, someone I respect, someone that's shown that he's willing to not just be looking for a specific roster, but actually grow with us and take a risk with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then, hey, we've got this Someday guy, pretty good at the top lane.
He's pretty
that's
all right.
pretty easy, right? That's the easiest announcement to make. And then it's how do we think this roster will play, and what kind of AD carry do we want? Cody was the last player signed, and it was very much aggressive mid laner, wants to get in there, gonna get some kills into the bit. We'll see how it goes. Meteos, control jungler. We need a finisher.
Right.
And you know who's a great finisher? With enough CS, it's Cody Sun.
You look domestically. I was having this conversation with some of the guys over the weekend, and Cody Sun's stats are like this enigma of, like, when you talk about LCS great AD carries, that his is not a name that's going to come up in that conversation on the outset. In part because his career has been shorter than some of the other guys, Sneaky, Double Lift, Wild Turtle, the likes. But in reality, when you look at the numbers, isolated to domestic LCS, I mean, he's right up there. He's right up there dueling Double Lift for that slot.
And the naysayers will come in and say that the numbers, don't necessarily show everything.
And the same problem we discussed.
We just had this conversation. What I will say is that I think everyone would agree that if he's got 6 items, you know what he's going to do, right? Yeah. He's reliable in what he can do at a certain point. And where our roster was, we felt like that's what we needed. So the fact that he is running it back, the fact that we can have all these remembrances of 2 years ago is absolutely a fun kind of spillage.
Yeah.
It can't be a roster direction to just bring back all the pieces that worked in a meta 2 years ago.
Right. High hopes for 100 Thieves this season. What about your hopes for North America as a whole? What just your initial impressions, either on some of the roster moves or what 2020 is going to look like for the LCS? Are we going to step up to it? Are the teams, the orgs, prepared to really grind to be that competitive in 2020? Have you been excited by some of the roster moves? What's going on there?
So obviously my perspective is much more narrowed and focused on one team, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to step back and fully appreciate that. What I will say is that if we think of North America as 20 teams, like we include the academy rosters there as well.
Yep.
I think overall the uptick in the level of the academy teams, and some of them are doing different things. Some of them, it's very obvious they're reserved for the first team. Other, it's very much rookies that are getting their first stint. But I think overall, the level there has risen across the 20 teams undeniably.
Cool.
Does that mean we go further in Worlds in 2020? I have no idea.
Right.
I just don't have the information there to make that
gap.
Yeah,
it'd be a big prediction to make right now.
But I look at it and I say, that's, do the quick maths, 100 players, right?
Yes.
I think the 100 players are better than the 100 players last year. And I think that if that stays true for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, it's not going to make our region worse. It can only be helpful.
Exactly, yeah.
So I really feel like North America is trying to recognize some of the mistakes of the past. I don't look at too many roster moves and wonder why. I understand the theory behind them, and I like the risks that people are taking. And now I just get to watch on and work out, who did it best, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. To put a little capper on it all, at the top of this, we talked about how you look at life or at goals in a couple different lenses, the short, the medium, and the long. What are the current short, medium, and long for Papasmithy? We've put casting at least behind us for now, and we're now in the GM position. I'm not asking necessarily for you to say, well, in 5 years, I'll no longer be the GM of 100 Thieves, but you get the gist of what I'm going for here. What's the game plan for Papasmithy?
I haven't put 1 second of thought into this. So let's give you the hot takes.
Let's go, hot takes.
Short-term goal is get the boys ready for first day of LCS.
Okay.
Playing Golden Guardians on the first day of the season. So that's coming up soon. We're like,
I know.
At this point of recording, we're like under 2 weeks, right? So
exactly.
Not long to go till then. So just absolutely getting everything on board. And that's more than just strategy, right? That's mostly Zix's side. It's very much getting everybody comfortable, getting everybody understanding of what's expected, just all the pieces that come to getting a team together. So that's the short-term goal.
Okay.
The medium-term goal is very much this development plan and just very much consistently being aware of where we're at, documenting that and making sure that we're making our improvements and adjustments where possible. So that will bear out over a season.
Cool.
The long-term goal for the team side, obviously, is success, championships, going to Worlds. But if we're going to go more personally for me, it's, again, fully integrating myself with the suite of options there are at 100 Thieves and understanding and growing and picking up responsibilities outside of just off-season roster changes and very much getting involved in whatever I can on the branding, marketing, content sides and things like that, and continue to grow, because it was this idea of bringing back some of my counseling days and my school psychologist days and being more than just an analyst. And I've absolutely got an umbrella role that facilitates that. So it's just trying to become more and more of a person that can wear many hats and wear them well.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. The previous experience in psychology, specifically working with young people too, right? And we know that esports skews very young. Do you feel like that is already paying dividends to you now in the position that you're in, that you have some amount of experience working with young people?
I think it's a fine line you have to draw, because you can't just be, obviously, a lot of teams have sports psychologists, right?
Yeah.
But I'm a sports psychologist who's the boss.
Right.
So
there's a power dynamic there.
There's a power dynamic there, and it's one that I always kind of leave on the table, where if anyone's like, this is weird or this is uncomfortable, then obviously we can look into alternatives there.
Yeah.
But I do have takes, and I think the players do know I'm on their side and want to see them reach their maximum capacity. So I do enjoy the one-on-one chats where after a scrim set, you take someone aside and you talk about some of the mentoring side, about some of the goal-setting side, about some of the things you've noticed that worked for them and haven't worked for them. And I love that contact. I love those chats, and being able to be more player facing, because obviously as a caster, it's much more about speaking about the idea of people, actually having them in front of you and being able to work with them has been super rewarding already. And I don't know where the journey's going, but I'm excited about every single day of it.
Sweet. My final question for you, TL, is the evil, the enemy, the villain coming into 2020, having won 4 in a row, looking for 5, maybe 6. Can the vanguard of 9 others take them down? Will we see a new LCS champion this year?
Honestly, I look at the list of names, the teams out there, and I say that everyone's made changes, everyone's working in directions, and I think the vice grip of Team Liquid on first place is very unlikely to extend to 2 more championships. There's always the possibility there, but I look at every team and I think this is how this team rises to first, and this is where this team may trip up, and that exists for my team as well. So given that, I think everyone's made bets, and the thing about throwing out bets is that not everyone can be right at the same time. There's going to be, high-profile successes and high-profile failures. So I think it's very unlikely that it's going to be business as usual for the LCS this year, and the same name's going to be in the same positions. There could be a topsy-turvy time coming up.
There could be a topsy-turvy time. Papasmithy, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Best of luck in your newest endeavor. We'll have to check back in and see how maybe any of your opinions around general managing and being on that side of the org have shifted, evolved, or changed in the future. But I'm going to let you go, and I can't wait to see you in a couple weeks on that stage.
It's going to be fun. I'll mostly be around the back, but I'll try to be out there for a tailgate. And
look, I get so much more Papasmithy this year than I normally get. The only bummer will be that I don't have Papasmithy on my analyst desk.
Hey, I'll see if I can find some time.
All right.
We'll work it out.
Well, I'm hoping you're actually at Worlds in a GM capacity maybe than in an analyst desk capacity. But Fingers crossed on that one. That is all the time that we have left for today with Papasmithy. Once again, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you on the Rift. We will be back throughout the split with more queues, but I want to know from you at home who you'd like to see me queue up with. Tweet at LOL Esports or at Riot Dash with some suggestions, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one.